Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. For those of you who are tuning in live for the Visto show, it is February the 19th, 2021. Diane, we were just talking about how crazy it is with the pandemic still going on in February of 2021. But anyways, thank you very much, Diane, for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because we cover a wide variety of topics on the Visto show and a really interesting one, especially amidst the pandemic and travel restrictions and exemptions, is relocation, right? And actually lifting up your life and moving it to a new country. That's something I've never done personally. And so that's, when I like to bring on the experts to cover it. But Diane, really first, really quickly before we get into it, can you just give everybody a little bit of a background about yourself and what you work on these days?
For sure. So, relocation came to me because of life experience. So, I'm a teacher and then took time off to raise our family. And when our kids were little, we did an expat move to Memphis, Tennessee, which was both the hardest thing we've ever done and the best thing we've ever done. And it was through moving our family there and then moving our family back home, I kind of learned about relocation naturally, loved it. And so came home and decided that that was what I wanted to jump into. So I started working for a big Canadian relocation management company. And I realized that Winnipeg being a small part of Canada, they had a piece of the puzzle. And you couldn't work for multiple relocation management companies. And so if I wanted to do something more and maybe more creative, I'd have to do it on my own. So that's where I got my CERC relocation specialist designation, and again realized I love it and I want to be in this area. And then started to build a website and launched Prairie Relocation in February of 2020, at the end of February. And 3 weeks later, our city shut down with COVID.
Yeah, wow.
So I know it was terrible
You
timing.
picked a terrible time, Diane. You should have known.
I know it was terrible, but actually, it probably wasn't terrible. Like most people, I took that time to network. I met people like you with Visto. I learned about the industry. I got my company probably more set up so I was ready. As soon as the clients would come, I'd be ready to roll. So it wasn't a bad time. And then I did the pivot on in October 2020 when Canada opened to immigration for students. I found that niche, and that's kind of where I've been since then. I thought I was going to be serving people moving as expats with their companies, and I have done that. But the biggest movement within Canada right now has been international students. So that's where I've been the last few months and loving it. It's great.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear. And yeah, sometimes, I mean, more of a business discussion, but you take what you can get, right? If the government says, hey, students can travel now, that's really good on you to make that pivot. Diane, I want to ask, as someone who's never moved countries before, can you take us through what it was like when you did that first move, you said to Memphis, I think, with your family? What's that like, especially for someone like me or from someone maybe outside Canada considering immigrating to Canada? What is the process like? What's the mindset? What were your thoughts, feelings, emotions when you were making that move?
At first, kind of panic because you're thinking of all the things you have to do. But with it was work moving with my husband's company, so they provided relocation specialists for us to work with. So they just kind of helped us organize what had to be done before we left, what had to be done when we got there. We did a pre-arrival trip where we went there and spent a day with someone looking at homes so we could choose our home in advance. They just helped us navigate the differences. So moving to the US didn't feel like a big move, but the southern US is its own country. It was definitely different. They helped us with just cultural things, the things that would be different. We were moving with kids, and that's a huge piece. So they helped us figure out how to get our kids connected and involved. Um, so there's a lot of things that we did on our own through research just on the internet, but it was really good to have someone that I could connect with and ask those questions about the exact city. What do I do when I get there? How do we navigate just daily life, right? In the beginning, when you move, you get there, you don't even know your neighbor, you don't know
Hmm.
anyone. So to have kind of a friend on the ground who can help you out was big for us.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things that pops into my head is how many of those little details or items that, you know, someone like me, so I do immigration, right? I file someone's paperwork, they get their approval, and I say, okay, great, my job's done. Whereas really that's kind of the beginning. And there's so many of those little things, like you said, getting your children integrated, picking a home, new cell phone, taxes, like all of that kind of stuff. How does somebody even begin to approach this? Let's say we have an international student. We'll use a good example, someone that, like the types of people you have experience with, and they're overseas, never been to Canada before. They received their study permit approval letter. Now they're thinking of, maybe let's ignore COVID for now. They're thinking about coming to Canada. Where do you even start? Should they have already started before they even get their study permit? How much time in advance should they give themselves for, actually planning to get on a plane? Um, Sorry, that's a whole lot of questions for you, but
Yeah,
I'd
that's
love to
good.
hear your thoughts.
So ideally, I would love if we could get to know each other 2 months before you come. That's a good amount of time. I have met people a week before they arrive and we pull it together, we make it work. But
Jeez.
the best plan is, if we can 2 or 3 months start to email. I have some forms that you can fill out just so I can get to know you. We'll do a Zoom conference or two. It's really getting to know the family. Often they're coming with their family. The one will have a study permit, one will have a work permit, and then their kids. The more I know about them before they come, the more I can network in Winnipeg before they get here.
Hmm.
So really, I'm their first friend on the ground. So they kind of tell me about their life, their hobbies, the things they want to get involved in. A big piece of that is, where they want to live. Will they have a vehicle? How do they want to get around? So once I know about them, then I can start to plan for them. Of course, throughout that time, I'm sending them information about the Canadian way, things that they should just start to learn. Um,
What
Lots
are
of,
some of those things? Can you give us maybe like one or two Canadian
how
way things?
even just like how banking works, how
Hmm.
house rental goes, um, cell phones, things that they want to get their kids involved in, all of those kind of things that we can kind of plan in advance. Daycare is a big one. Daycare is hard to get into. So the sooner that I can start to network on their behalf, the better chance we'll have options when they arrive.
Right. Yeah, there's so many moving pieces. What about more logistical things like getting that first apartment? Let's say it's a student coming, they want to find an apartment, cell phone, banking. Is that the kind of stuff that you can help with as well? And how would you recommend people approach that in general?
For sure. So some people look into it before they come, although they have 2 weeks of quarantine. So that's a big chunk of what I help people with. So that first 2 weeks of quarantine, I make sure that we get done as much as we can. So during that time, they'll apply for their social insurance number. They will get their Manitoba Health if they're eligible. I'll send them, if they're interested in having a virtual meeting with a banker, an advisor, so they can get all their Canadian bank account set up. Most of it can be done virtually. That way, it's just a short, quick run to the bank after their quarantine's finished.
Hmm.
So all of those things we can kind of get done in advance. It's because of COVID, a lot of that can now be done online, which is actually helpful.
Hmm.
So they can make use of their quarantine time as well.
Got it. And can you talk a little bit, Diane, to what are the things that you often see people forgetting or not getting right, whether they're working with you or they're just, doing their relocation alone? Are there like common mistakes that you see in relocation experiences, I guess?
Yeah, probably the biggest one is if people aren't planning ahead. So, um, researching ahead and getting prepared for things you'll need. So, those first 30 days, that is kind of the time frame that I spend with people, quarantine and then getting settled after that. If you can bring things like your driver's abstract, your claims history with your vehicle, your child's last report card, your child's shot records, um, your rental references from people that you've rented from. If you can bring those papers with you so that you have them, it's so much easier than once you're here. Now you have to try to get people at home to get it together and send it to you. So
Hmm.
that kind of research in advance is really helpful.
Right. Or basically just bringing as much paperwork as you as you
For
can
sure.
is what it sounds like.
For sure.
So what's it been like, Diane? Let's talk specifically about COVID. Obviously, it's thrown a whole bunch of things, for a loop. But what are some of the COVID specific things that maybe even you've had to learn or adjust because of how travel, obviously quarantine is a big one. If you can talk to, what does relocation look like during COVID with the big differences compared to pre-COVID?
Well, quarantine's a big one, and that's one of the biggest reasons why people reach out is quarantine would be so hard to do on your own. So that's a piece that we can take care of for you. Um, it starts off obviously, the quarantine plan. Make sure you have, the Arrive Can app, and that you know all of the things that are restrictions that are in place that you need to take care of. Picking you up at the airport, bringing you to your location, bringing you groceries. It's so much nicer to be in a suite where you can cook and have space and have groceries.
Mm-hmm.
It's healthier, it's more fun, better for families. So that's definitely a piece that we can help with. The things that are uncertain, I think that's the hardest part for people during COVID is that the restrictions are always changing. The big one now with the new quarantine rule coming into effect apparently on Monday, where you need to fly into one of the four main airports in Canada and then spend 3 days there while you wait for a COVID test. That just makes it really hard for people to plan. So they've
Mm-hmm.
planned for this relocation for so long. They're so excited. They've saved, and now this extra hassle. So I don't know if you have any inside scoops, but I keep reading about exemptions, thinking, will these poor people be exempt? They have good plans. Can they get to their final location and take care of things there? Um, that's probably the biggest hurdle is just not knowing the rules.
Yeah, I mean it's also a big cash sink too, right? They're charging quite a lot for 3 days in a hotel. I was actually looking at this the other day because I was trying to find more information, and they mention on the government website that there are exemptions, but they don't mention what the exemptions are. I was actually having a LinkedIn conversation with someone yesterday about this, with another lawyer, and was like, "Do you know what the exceptions are?" I don't really know what the exceptions are. It says that essential travelers are exempt. So does that mean that all international students and workers who are coming to work or study are considered essential for the purposes of this exemption? I don't really know. A lot of times what IRCC does is they'll put up the full instructions the day they launch it. So in this case, February 22nd, they'll like revamp like for example, with the recent, there was a new public policy work permit that came out, and they gave us some minor, most details, but it wasn't until the day that they actually made the program live that the government website actually came out with the full, here's the requirements, here's the guide, et cetera, et cetera. So we might have to
Exactly.
wait till the 22nd, to be honest, to get the full details. I'll definitely keep our Visto followers updated when I learn a little bit more, because I've been getting asked that question a lot. And it's such a big aspect, right? Having to, maybe reroute flights, pay that extra money in and of itself is, a big ask. What do you say, Diane, to people who are coming to Canada for a wide variety of reasons, in terms of finding that first place to live, or even, to stay for a little bit? Do you recommend the kind of short-term Airbnb type to figure out the city first, or do you recommend, hey, let's find you an apartment or a house and sign a year plus long lease? What do you recommend in that regard?
The most typical would be that we do temporary accommodations, and that'll be for usually 30 days. In
Hmm.
30 days, we fly. We get a lot done. And so, pretty much when that 30 days is finished, they're ready to move into their rental. If they want to purchase a home, that temporary accommodation will probably be extended a little bit. Um, but yeah, so their quarantine is the first 14 days. About a day or two after that, I like to give them a breather so they can at least venture out for a day before we spend a day in the vehicle.
Hmm.
But I'll pick them up and we'll have homes or apartments that we'll go and look at together. Usually by late morning, they've already picked one they love. We get
Hmm.
right into lease negotiations, do a few more settling in things that day, and then they've got about 10 days to start gathering furniture and just ordering some things. And then usually after 30 days, they move into their 1 year lease. Now,
Jeez.
no obligation. If of course, if the things I find are not to their liking and they want to do another day, we research another day and plan it, great. Um, but typically that's not the case. Typically they're eager to kind of get settled, get their kids in school. In Winnipeg, your kids go to school in the neighborhood you live, and so they are kind of eager to know what that address will be so they can get connected with school.
Absolutely. And so, what's the big difference with students? If it's a student, let's say they have no family, they're coming alone, maybe they're younger, early 20s, etc. Is that similar, but instead of houses, you're looking for apartments? Do you still go with the 30-day kind of temporary stay?
For sure. Now it's flexible, so I have done it as low as 3 weeks. But typically, they still to get that next apartment, they still want some time to get settled. With students, it's pretty much the same, except then we're looking close to the universities. A lot of them don't want to have vehicles, so they want to be close by where they can walk. But it's a pretty similar situation. A few people will want furnished homes or furnished apartments, but they realize quickly that that's a really expensive way to go.
Yeah, in Canada for sure.
But
Absolutely. This is super interesting, Diane. The other thing I wanted to ask is if somebody, because it sounds like, especially those first few weeks are hectic, right? And you are doing a lot to help make that a lot easier. What do you recommend to someone if they want to try and do this alone? Like how should they think about it? Is there like an order of operations that they should tackle? Should you do banking before housing or this before that, or et cetera, et cetera? Like maybe like two or three tips for someone who's knows they're going to be relocating soon. For whatever reason, they're just going to do it alone. They don't want to work with a professional. What are some pieces of advice you'd give to them?
obviously the first thing is you need your place of quarantine. So just make sure that you have that plan rock solid so that it beats all the regulations. Setting up banking is really important. First thing, you don't need a permanent address to set up a bank account in Canada. So that's really important. Social insurance number. Most of these people are coming and they want to work as well as go to school. So you need that number before you can get a job. The students usually are getting their health insurance through the university. If it's a family, then you'll want to often apply for Manitoba Health if you're eligible. Researching homes. So there's lots of online possibilities to find rentals. So that would be the next place. During quarantine, I'd be starting to look where you want to live.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like those are definitely like the big pillars, and everything kind of stems from there. So that's great. Diane, any other thoughts or questions? What about those who, like, this is a little bit more niche, but with regards to permanent residents, sometimes a lot of permanent residents will do what's called a soft landing. So they'll come to Canada just to kind of get the PR card process actually going and then go back home. Any recommendations on if someone is coming to, like you also mentioned, you went to do a visit in Memphis right before you moved there. If someone is going to do a soft landing in Canada, or maybe heck, they just going to come visit, you can't really right now because of the travel restrictions, but let's say someone was coming for a pre-full move visit, what should they be focusing on getting done in that visit time?
Well, I know when we moved to Memphis, the biggest thing was finding housing. That's what we wanted to do. So we spent most of our time doing that. Once that was finished, we started looking at the other pieces, right? What things do we want to get connected in? Once we knew where we were going to live, we could go check out the school. Usually
Right.
for parents, that's probably the biggest thing, right? You want to make sure your kids are in a safe place. We looked for a few hobby type things as well. When you get there and your calendar is wide open and you don't have connections, that's really how you're going to make it feel like home, is to start doing things and get involved in, whether it's sports or church or whatever things are part of your hobbies. That's a good way to just start to make it feel like home a little bit faster.
Got it. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Diane, let's finish up by talking a little bit more about your services. If there are people out there who are going to be relocating soon, what is the scope of what you will help someone with? I mean, it sounds like it's an extremely wide scope, right? You sound like you're a real estate agent and a life planner and so many other different, a banker, all this kind of stuff in one. Can you talk a little bit about the scope of, what people can expect to get out of when they work with you?
For sure. I think I'm going to add that life planner. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to add that to the next business card. The scope. So once we get to know each other, we basically, I feel my role is after Josh, you and the immigration side of things have have put all the legality in and allowed them to come to Canada legally, I get to move their life. So anything that's life related. So after we get to know each other, I'll make sure that you're set up before you come with the things you need. Once you get here, we'll do quarantine, and then we'll find you a place to live. Um, just really finding all the pieces to make it home. So the reason I did a business on my own is because I didn't want to be put in a box. I didn't want to just follow those 10 checklist things, and once they're checked off, we're done. So we're not going to do anything that's not valuable for your family or for you. But if there's extra things, I recently had clients with 3 dogs, so that's a whole nother ball game. Or they have different kinds of hobbies. I'm local. I know Winnipeg, and so if I can't find you a job, but if I have connections, I'm happy to put you, in touch with those people. The other kind of piece of the puzzle that's not usually part of this is I have enjoyed getting to know my clients so well that I actually want them to succeed later. So I actually stay in touch with them. I send them emails of things that are going on. Recently, we've had so many people come from all over the world with international students. Looking forward to, maybe having, potlucks, prairie relocation potluck, getting people together, getting expats together. They can learn from each other. I know when we were in Memphis, we had the same thing where we get together with other expats, and those are the people who understand you. They understand the things that aren't working. They can help you out with things they've learned. So it's kind of an ongoing relationship. And while you say that my offering is huge, it is, but anything that I'm not expert in, I have experts here that do it. So if you want to purchase a house, we will go with a real estate agent. So things like that, I just kind of pull together the best of what I can find and hook them together.
Awesome. And are you strictly in the Manitoba region, Winnipeg specifically? What's the geography look like?
So Winnipeg is my area of expertise. I'll do Manitoba, although across Canada, I have, over COVID, networked with numerous smaller relocation companies across the country. So if you're moving anywhere and just want that connection, I'd be happy to connect people with other businesses similar to mine in other places.
Awesome. And Diane, if someone wants to work with you or even just learn more about your business or yourself, where do you recommend they go?
Website is probably the easiest, www.prairierelocation.com. Also on LinkedIn as well is another place to find me there.
Awesome. And we'll link to both of those in the description once these go live or once these are up on YouTube and Facebook. Diane, thanks very much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Josh.